I am joined today by Kyle Vowinkel, retired FBI agent and the recipient of the Attorney General Award for Exceptional Heroism, which is the U.S. DOJ's highest award. And I've been hearing about Kyle Vowinkel for years, for decades, actually, because one of my best family friends is married to your brother. And for years, I've been hearing stories, in front of fireplaces and the Pacific Northwest rain about your heroism and the stories, just the very tip of the iceberg of the part that you have played in some of our most instrumental, impactful events that have faced this nation. And quite frankly, the service that you have shown to this country, your service on a daily basis in and out of uniform is outstanding. And I'm so grateful to meet you finally in this forum and to have you join us today. So Kyle Vowinkel, thank you so much for joining my true crime podcast for Fox News.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm truly humbled by your words. I was able and fortunate to serve with true heroes in two different national level assets, the hostage rescue team, as well as the crisis negotiation unit. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you for having me.
And the reason that you're here today, we are going to discuss at length what happened in Alabama, in Midland City on January 29th, 2013. Can you tell us that story?
Yes, it started out with a rural school bus driver, a man named Charles Poland, who drove his route each and every day up and down a dirt road. And you should have a picture of that I sent you. And he would turn off the dirt road, drive up, drop the kids off, would have to U-turn and then drive back down the road. And there was a man that lived along that road who actually had a diabolical plan, a determined individual by the name of Jim Dykes, who cultivated a relationship with that bus driver. And he actually cleared brush out of that road in order to make it easier for Mr. Poland to turn around. And Mr. Poland recognized that Mr. Dykes had done that. So out of the kindness of his heart, Mr. Poland left a dozen eggs and some of his wife's homemade jelly and a little note for Mr. Dykes. He was trying to befriend Mr. Dykes. Again, reaching back out to him, an example of the reciprocity principle, which we study in CNU. And unfortunately, the next day, Mr. Dykes comes to the school bus and Mr. Poland stops the bus and opens the door for one last time. Mr. Dykes steps on board, and he hands Mr. Poland a note demanding two well-mannered children be handed over to Mr. Dykes. And it's a harrowing, chilling video of the actual hostage taking, and I do warn your viewers, when they watch it, it's quite graphic and disturbing. You'll hear foul language, you'll hear children screaming, so just skip past it. That 2 or 3 minutes if you don't want to witness that, because even now, as I've seen it 100 times plus, it still gets to me.
Don't! I can't. You got to. It's the only way. There will not be harm. You won't be harmed.
It's my responsibility.
I can't help that.
I
can't help that. This is. I won't go to the
I
rules.
can't turn them over to somebody else.
The rules that go. We can't help it. It don't matter. It's got to go. Come here, kid. The two in the back seat. You, the girl, and that boy right there. Come here. You will not be harmed. You will not be harmed. I'm telling you. Come here. Come on.
He's scared to death. He's scared.
You will not be harmed, son. You will not be harmed, son.
I'm sorry, I cannot.
I'm gonna have to shoot you now. Come on, I don't have any time. The goddamn law's coming. Come on! Don't!
Can't do it.
Don't! All right, now do it! Do it! No! Come on! Come here, kid! Come here! Come on! Come here! No, the boy! Come here! Come here! Come here! Come here! Come here! Come here!
Hearing that audio is absolutely raw. It's frightening. And it's what happened that day. We warn viewers, it's not for the faint of heart. Walk us through what happened when Dykes boarded the bus.
So Mr. Poland opens the door thinking that, Mr. Dykes, the person he reached out to, is going to be friendly. Actually, Mr. Dykes had a bag of broccoli and carrots, which was kind of a fake offer to Mr. Poland. And he steps on board, hands him that note, and then proceeds to demand that Mr. Poland pick out 2 children for him. He leaves the note there. Mr. Poland really doesn't have time to read the note, and it's tragic and moving at the same time as you witness the heroism of Mr. Poland. He's confronted with a pistol, right? Mr. Dykes is holding a pistol, aiming it a few feet from Mr. Poland, and he heroically refuses. He defiantly says, "I will not hand over children on my bus. They are my responsibility." So Mr. Poland literally gave his life to protect his flock, to protect those children, which he viewed as his own. And unfortunately, Mr. Dykes shoots Mr. Poland 5 times, and Mr. Poland expires there in the bus in front of all the children, and then starts issuing demands, barking at the children to come forward. And actually, the first 911 call comes from the back of the bus. A 15-year-old named Trey Watts calmly calls 911 and first notifies them there's a man on the bus with a gun. So that's the initial response, initial notification to law enforcement to respond to that scene. And he tells them, yes, he just shot our bus driver and took a kid off a bus. There's actually a recording of the 911 call from Trey Watts, which is also remarkable how calm and cool that 15-year-old was in the face of this crisis. And Mr. Dykes, none of the kids responded to his demands. I think the kids probably kind of followed Mr. Poland's heroic, defiant stance, and they did not listen to Mr. Dykes. So Mr. Dykes just stepped forward to the first child, the nearest child to Mr. Poland was Ethan Gilman, who is seated right behind Mr. Poland. He reaches, grabs him, puts him over his shoulder, then takes Ethan off the bus about 100 feet to his underground bunker, which he had created, hand fabricated over the past year, digging out this 6 by 8 foot by 12 foot straight drop of an underground lair, where he was going to keep his initially 2 children. He wanted 2 children off the bus. He only got 1. And then he took Ethan down this bunker, left him down there. Then Dykes climbs up this ladder. It's a very steep, 12 feet up ladder. He himself picks up the phone, uses his cell phone. Mr. Dykes calls 911 himself and reports that he shot and killed the bus driver. He didn't want to do it, but Mr. Poland made him, which is fascinating. The behavior, right? We analyze behavior as crisis negotiators. As we look at Dykes' behavior, his plan was for Dykes to get 2 children off the bus that Mr. Poland would select, right? So he gave victim selection to the bus driver because he didn't want to be responsible for that. And same thing here on the telephone call to 911, he blames Mr. Poland for him having to shoot him, saying, I didn't want to shoot him, but Mr. Poland made me do it. So just interesting, again, as we're looking at the mind of this determined, diabolical individual, he will not accept responsibility, kind of views himself as a victim. And interesting enough, our behavioral analysis unit, they had personnel on scene, and they termed Mr. Dykes an injustice collector, that he had collected all these grievances throughout his life, and now he was going to air them and tell us a story. And that was also what he said in the letter. I want 2 children to force the powers that be to listen, because he wanted to tell his fantastical story and, again, vent all his grievances, and that would change the world in his mind. So he was justified in his mind for doing what he was doing, taking a child, an innocent 5-year-old off a bus. So he calls 911. Actually, the first call gets interrupted. He dials back. He wants to make sure 911 receives his information.
And society, I can't stand the way people are. I can't stand all the lies and hypocrisy coming from every angle of the media, politics, neighbors, the crookedness, the status quo mentality of how it's okay for, in other words, all these people around here got dogs running around loose. If I had hogs running around loose, rooting holes in their yard, the law would come and arrest me.
Yep.
Or if I didn't take care of my dog. Well, you see, the politicians, they don't care. They pass laws to get votes.
So that was Jim Dykes there on his call to 911. It was not the first connection, the first contact with law enforcement. As you said earlier, the 15-year-old Trey Watts on board the bus was the first to make contact with 911. And now here's Jimmy Dykes calling them himself. Walk us through what that meant for you in your analysis of his mental state, of his level of preparation, of the desperation that you might be encountering.
Well, it's truly unique in a law enforcement crisis for an individual to summon 911 and call police upon himself. What it showed to us is that he needed law enforcement. He needed us to provide him with, in his mind, or what he wanted was a hearing. He wanted the media to be there to broadcast his message. So he was going to force law enforcement through the kidnapping of this child. And Ethan was his bartering chip. Ethan was his poker chip that he knew would force law enforcement to respond and therefore cave to his demands to bring the media there to listen to him tell his story. So on the one hand, it's very good in the fact that the subject wants something from law enforcement and needs something from law enforcement. So that really empowers law enforcement, at least initially in our response, knowing that the subject wants us there, needs us there, says he has a story to tell, which as negotiators, that's perfect. The subject wants to talk to us. That's what we do. We listen, we gain intelligence, we try to build rapport, demonstrate empathy, use the negotiator tools to begin a conversation with the subject to, dive deeper into the issues and hopefully try to peacefully resolve it. Although in this case, he was determined and he made his own decisions about the outcome. But we were initially, examining his behavior. We thought it was a positive sign, right? That he had this story to tell, and we thought maybe we could possibly peacefully resolve it, although it started out horrible, right, with a murder of a, innocent bus driver. But then, Mr. Dykes, I think, never could have imagined the law enforcement, tsunami, the response of our nation's, finest in the FBI and DOJ that came when he called us. So I don't think could have predicted the crushing pressure of the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group, CIRG, which is really like a juggernaut of every crisis response entity and asset in the FBI that was made to respond to incidents like this. So that night is really when CIRG started spinning up to respond to this incident.
So Kyle, what did it mean for your analysis then that Dykes had approached and initiated the situation with a demand that off the bat was not met? So he came on the bus with a letter demanding that he wanted 2 kids handed to him. Instead, he engaged in a murder, and then he physically picked up 1 child. He demanded that he wanted 2 well-mannered kids. From the beginning, his efforts were being thwarted. How did you find that impacted the response of all of the agencies, all of law enforcement, and your analysis?
So we looked at Dykes and he created this plan in his mind. And in his mind, there was only one route or one way that the plan would achieve success. And what happens is he reaches an obstacle with Mr. Poland, right? He wanted Poland to pick those 2 children for him. That was Dykes' plan. And then he met that obstacle, the heroic Mr. Poland, who would not go along with his plan. So what did he do? He removed that obstacle. He used lethal force to kill an impediment to his plan. So we see that we assess him as, also BAU described him as a promise keeper. He told Mr. Poland, I will shoot you if you do not follow and go through with my plan and select those children. And what did Dykes do? He followed through with what he said. He said he was going to kill Mr. Poland, and he did. Right. We had to take then very seriously each threat and each ultimatum or edict from Mr. Dykes, because he had demonstrated his behavior, right? We analyze behavior, and past actions are usually the best predictor of future behavior. And he followed through. He was a promise keeper to his threat of violence to kill Mr. Poland. So that meant we had to believe everything he told us moving forward.
Tell us more about Ethan.
Ethan, as painful as this is to say, was almost the perfect victim because he had a form of Asperger's. He had a slight developmental disorder, and that's actually one of the reasons he sat so close to Mr. Poland. They had a close bond, and he liked to be there near Mr. Poland. Again, he was his, almost caretaker on that bus. He was his, guardian angel, so to speak, to look after Ethan. And Ethan had a really tough home situation. He was in and out of foster care growing up. Father's totally out of the picture. And so he didn't have, many great, role models in his life. And Mr. Poland was one of those people that he looked up to. And Ethan, because of his Asperger's, required medication 3 times a day. So here we have the second impediment to Mr. Dykes' plan. Because in his letter, he asked Mr. Poland to pick 2 well-mannered, healthy children for him to take. And Ethan, right, had that Asperger's, so he needed medication. So he required 3 times a day pills in order to help him manage that Asperger's, or else Ethan would get unruly. So right off the bat, law enforcement's quite concerned, right, for Ethan's behavior. We don't want Ethan to become unruly inside the bunker. We don't want him to rile up Mr. Dykes. We don't want Mr. Dykes to take out any aggravation on Ethan, because now Ethan, right, is not what he wanted according to his plan. Ethan was not a healthy child, and now he's got that second, deviation from his plan. He has a child that needs medication 3 times a day. So it definitely altered the dynamics of, as we assess the behavior of, and we're so worried how Dykes was going to treat Ethan, and we had to get medication in there. So the first responders, Bill Rafferty was the first negotiator from the Houston County Sheriff's Department who spoke to Dykes, and he told him on that very first conversation, hey, Ethan needs medication. We're going to have to somehow provide medication to Ethan.
And so how is that then the perfect victim as it relates to how it benefits law enforcement?
Great question. Because of that medication requirement 3 times a day, as we look at Mr. Dykes' property, and I sent you a picture of the property, he very intelligently crafted his bunker, right? Very determined. He's an older gentleman, 65, but very strong, very wiry, very independent and determined. And he built that bunker with cinder block construction, a very heavy hatch, very heavy garage door springs. He had winch cables inside to secure that hatch. He wanted nobody coming inside his bunker. That hatch then also was on top, right, about 200 pounds, very heavy. And then he created that communications system with a white PVC tube, so law enforcement would be 170 feet away, right? He didn't want anyone coming in that security ring that he had created. And now, though, because of Ethan requiring the medication, right, we had to go persuade Dykes, the negotiators, to allow us to come deliver medication to Ethan 3 times a day. So it enabled us to have 3 times a day additional contact with the subject, additional target analysis of the bunker, right? So instead of being 170 feet away for 7 days, we were up at that bunker hatch lid 3 times a day, and we're able to, again, do some clever investigative techniques. We're able to engage face-to-face, well, not really face-to-face, but within hearing shot of each other, whereas normally it was just on the phone when we communicate with Dykes and negotiate with him, but now we're within voice communication with him. So Ethan's condition enabled us to have extra engagement with Dykes, and again, that extra examination of the surrounding areas and the target itself for tactical to plan emergency and deliberate assault options.
So you've mentioned the collaboration between these agencies, or at least named the multitude of agencies that responded that first night. And so setting the scene a little bit here. So we've got what you arrive to the scene and encounter a very complex bunker that this man has created. Undoubtedly, it took him an extensive amount of time, with a security perimeter The latter, he had an elaborate plan developed to, at that point, take 2 children hostage. He had Ethan, which now you're assessing has special needs, requires medication 3 times a day. It includes what you just said. So the need to communicate or have contact with Dykes at least 3 times a day. And you've also had the murder in front of 21 children of the bus driver. So walk us through that global initial assessment as you get on scene with all of these different federal and local and state agencies and you encounter that situation. What does that all lead to in your initial analysis?
Well, it was day one when we, back at SERG headquarters in Stafford, Virginia, when we first got word of the murder and we first saw the letter. So actually day one, we're beginning our analysis of Dykes and we start preparing for the contingency deployment. All right, the hostage rescue team and the crisis negotiation unit only do full team deployments on the FBI director's orders, right, which has to be also requested usually by the special agent in charge, the SAC of the respective field office. In this case, Mobile, Alabama was SAC Steve Richardson, and he actually called and requested HRT and CNU to deploy, and then the director authorized that on day 2 in the morning. So we flew out on the FBI aircraft and arrived, and it was a massive law enforcement response already just on day 2. Hundreds of law enforcement officers from Houston County, from Dale County Sheriff's Office, the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, and multiple FBI field offices. The Atlanta negotiation team was the first ones from outside Mobile to arrive that night 1, and they did a fantastic job. They actually persuaded Dykes to accept a throw phone, which is a communication device which is hardwired so the subject can talk to law enforcement and only law enforcement 24/7. He can just pick up that phone. Because what we found out night 1 is that some technically trained agents, one of the FBI specialty agents, were examining that speaking tube. And they were getting a close look at it, and they tried to put a camera down, and there's some obstruction. So they called up a special agent bomb technician, an SABT, who came up and he took an X-ray of that speaking tube, right? This is where Dykes had requested law enforcement talk to him at the speaking tube. And they X-ray it night 1, and lo and behold, there's an improvised explosive device inside that speaking tube. So as we analyze the risks, like they're off the chart at this point, because right, not only has he killed Mr. Poland, he's taken an innocent 5-year-old hostage, and now he has an offensive bomb in this speaking tube where he called law enforcement. So now we're thinking, is this all part of a plan just to kill the negotiators or kill more law enforcement by that bomb outside? So that was really the final straw, not that we needed any more. I should say the Bureau didn't need any more, but that was the final straw to deploy HRT and CNU and the rest of that SERG juggernaut, as I described. So we all arrived day 2. And then it was just really a fantastic team of teams. And I would say this, if it wasn't, I've been some crazy circuses with a lot of clowns, like the Boston Marathon bombing. I was there. That was definitely crazy with the cast of characters there. But in Dothan and Midland City, it was a fantastic mesh of individuals because everyone was singularly focused on the goal of getting Ethan out alive. There was really no clashes. We, again, all worked together with that goal. So just on the negotiation team, we had 25 different negotiators from numerous different departments. My partner, Vince, and I were the program managers. So he was the leader of the negotiation element. I was kind of like his deputy. And we all collectively worked together, and it was actually incredible teamwork there.
So as you've set this scene, the circus as you call it, but a highly organized, responsive team made up of, it sounds like, hundreds of individuals that are part of these collective, again, local, state, federal agencies. But it's one person you're communicating with, and that's Jimmy Dykes, who's very entrenched in that community. So talk to us about the delicacy of, or the fine dressing needed between these agencies, and who exactly was the voice that Jimmy was listening to and or communicating with, and why?
So day 1, it was Bill Rafferty. He was that Houston County Sheriff's deputy, and because he was the first responder. And he was an FBI trained negotiator, all over the country. We hold negotiation courses, and we actually have a 2-week class back at Quantico as well. So he was a trained FBI negotiator. So what that does, again, with his nationwide training, is it puts all the negotiators at least on the same terminology, the same playing field, the same kind of principles. So it's just like in a crisis, it's exactly what it's for. We can all kind of mesh together. So day 2, we said, hey, let's try an FBI negotiator to see how they would do as far as engaging and speaking with Mr. Dykes. You tell me your assessment, Emily, whether you feel like this is two-way communication or not.
Went into business with my brother-in-law. I helped him build a rig, a liquid asphalt rig. We went down to Panama City. We was making damn good money. My first chance in life of getting somewhere in life. And I tried, and he came up with a formula for the mix. The formula was fine. We was making big money. We did the Eat Broke Dog site for $50,000. But then our salesman, a drunk alcoholic salesman, cheated us out of $10,000 that deal. And then on top of that, John, my brother-in-law, he started half-assing the mix. When you come up with a formula, you do not change the formula.
Yeah.
And he did. And I said, John, we got to stick with the formula now. We got to have everything right. Oh, it's okay. I know what I'm doing. And so we ended up, we lost the contract on a McDonald's down there, the last job I worked with him. And it just messed up terrible. They sued him. Well, the business shut down. I had to go back to work driving a truck. And then after I warned him, I said, that salesman's going to screw us, John. He's no good drunk. He's going to screw us over. He said, well, no, I got him under control. Well, but you see, it all went down just like I said. I warned him, and it happened just like I said. Well,
you got betrayed, yeah.
Okay, I'm not a behavioral analyst, Kyle, but what I heard is that he was talking at, definitely not talking with,
right, and
that he perceived himself as a victim, a woe is me, or at least that was a woe is me tale.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot there. I've heard it.
Okay.
Yeah. I've heard that, again, 100 times, and I still can't make sense of what Dykes is saying.
I feel better.
Yeah, he's just rambling, right? He's going on, and the negotiator actually does a very good job. He uses minimal encouragers, go on, So the negotiator doesn't interrupt. He's allowing Dykes to vent and tell his story, right? This is what Dykes wanted to do. And he actually tries an emotional label there at the end. Sounds like he'd been betrayed. But really, it's just one-way communication. It is just Dykes speaking directly to that FBI negotiator. There's no real connection or bond there. And actually, interesting tidbit, we were given daily updates to the FBI director, and he asked, how are things going down there on one of the updates? So they're pretty good. We had 2 calls. And he said, 2 calls? We've got 100 plus FBI down there, 25 negotiators. What's going on? Sir, each call was 4 hours long.
Oh my gosh.
So
4 hours of that rambling, the one-sided rambling.
Yeah. How would you, it was painful. So yeah, imagine trying to listen to that and have a conversation 4 hours long.
Can I ask you, I can't imagine, especially when the stakes are so high. That's the thing. I mean, he had a boy with him. So I can't imagine having to endure that while understanding every second ticking by is so precious for Ethan's life and keeping him on his medication. So given that rambling, how soon was it articulated to you the actual demands that Dykes had? So we heard the demands in the beginning, right? He wants his kids. Then he takes one, and then he calls 911. But how soon did law enforcement appreciate exactly what Dykes was truly demanding, and what was it?
It was on day 2, at least when I was there, and I was listening to every single minute. That was my first task, actually, was just stay up through the night and listen to every one of the calls from day 1 to assess Dykes, and again, to get a picture of that, a picture of his mental state and what he wanted. And what he wanted was a young female reporter, attractive female reporter, to come down in his bunker. And only then, when the female reporter was inside his bunker, would he release Ethan, right? There was no deviation from his plan. The reporter would enter the bunker, then and only then would he release Ethan to come out. And then he would talk for 2 or 3 days to the reporter, tell his fantastical story and air all his grievances. Again, how he was a victim and got a ticket in Indiana for his truck being overweight, but he was mad because in Michigan, the truck would not have been overweight. And he has a detailed suicide plan. Once he tells the story, which again will take 2 or 3 days, he's going to put a plastic bag over his head. It has a small plastic tube, which is then connected to a helium tank. He's going to open the helium tank to let the gas come in, which will displace the oxygen in his lungs, and he will pass away and die. And then the female reporter has the wonderful task. She's shackled, by the way, in his plan, and she would have to find a file and file her shackles off, and then she would be able to emerge from the bunker alive.
And so when law enforcement is faced with a demand of that nature, that includes a suicide and bringing in another life to a hostage situation, what is the first response?
Well, the first response, I remember my partner grabbed me because, again, it's very challenging during a crisis because you're always in react mode, right? You're reacting to the subject, and you have to detach yourself from the crisis and literally analyze and assess. Very hard to do. My partner was exceptional at it, and I remember he pulled me aside on day 3 and said, we have to escape this kind of circus. Let's you and I talk. And he said, at the end of the day, you know, we're talking, is Dykes ever going to get what he wants? And we both said no. Law enforcement is not going to introduce a new victim into that crisis. We just don't do it. So at the end of the day, we project this road of however many days or weeks we can negotiate for months. However, right at the very end, we are not going to be able to fulfill Dykes' demand for a child. So we realized kind of at day 3, we would not, again, satisfy his demand. So in the interim, we're still going to talk to him. We're going to provide him, listening so that we can kind of protect and shield Ethan so he can vent towards the negotiators. And really, we're going to stall for tactical and stall for any other possible ideas or solutions because we know at the end of the day, we can't give him what he wants. So it really was at kind of the end of day 3, we realized, or at least as we're talking, that this is probably not going to end well. And it's probably going to have to be a tactical resolution, even though we don't want that, right? We'd rather have a peaceful resolution, getting Ethan out of there and Dykes alive. But he, again, assessing his behavior, is so determined, sees no alternatives to his plan. It's a report in the bunker, that only then Ethan comes out. Like, he would not see any other alternatives. We had one negotiator very non-confrontationally say at the end of the day, hey, Jim, what can we do about getting Ethan out of the bunker? And Dykes became enraged, not enraged, he just became upset. And Dykes said, I don't want to ever talk to you again, you're fired. And actually, going back to your previous question, after we tried 2 FBI negotiators, we realized that Bill Rafferty, again, was a local. He had that kind of southern drawl and twang, and he knew the area, and he knew the same people as Dykes in the community. So we, again, collectively decided, let's put Bill Rafferty back on that primary phone line with Dykes. So again, a perfect example of the FBI is there with hundreds of people, but we are not going to force ourselves into, that primary communication if it's not the best solution. The best solution was putting Rafferty back on there because he had connected and bonded a little bit with Dykes. So the whole 25-person team then was there supporting Bill Rafferty.
So what I'm hearing is that law enforcement had sort of 2 options. One being negotiation, the successful surrender of Dykes on his own, the successful returning of Ethan safely, and he surrenders. And the other option, when you say tactical, means that the good guys go in there and they get Ethan out. And that's because in his demands, you ascertain it included suicide. And because he was a promise keeper, because he demonstrated that he removes obstacles, even if it requires murder, you take him at his word. And so instead of expecting a potential successful resolution from negotiation, you guys know all signs are then now pointing toward a tactical resolution. Is that a correct summation of a simple summation of the situation at that point, Kyle?
Yes and no, right? Because we still, even though we assess it, it's likely to end with a homicide, suicide, or a violent confrontation, right? We assess that's most likely going to happen. We still are, so we are, tactical is preparing for a potential tactical resolution. However, we are still trying, right, the negotiation route. We would always prefer law enforcement a peaceful resolution, which is obviously a negotiated route, no confrontations, and everyone walks out and emerges alive. However, we have to have that parallel plan of the of the tactical resolution if negotiations don't fail if the subject chooses not to, the subject makes a choice here in every case, and hopefully they choose to peacefully surrender or peacefully emerge. But we proceeded in Dothan down both tracks of negotiation and tactical resolution, and that's where I kind of came in, especially towards the end, being a former tactical operator on HRT and being a negotiator. I was able to craft that parallel approach plan to help give us both options, right, of a negotiated resolution if Dykes chose and was willing to go that way, or it opened a window for tactical resolution if we were forced to.
Was there at any point concern or evidence of abuse or sexual assault or a sexual purpose articulated by Dykes either toward Ethan or that reporter? Was there anything in that realm? And if not, how were you reassured for his safety as all this time was going by?
A terrific question. We were very concerned initially. Was he taking these children just for his sexual gratification? Like, what was he going to do to these two children? So first off, the only thing we had right initially day one to assess was the letter. So literally, me and my partner went word by word through the letter, and he instructs Mr. Poland to give him two children so he can tell his story. Nowhere in there does he talk about his desires or his needs, to gratify himself with these children. So at least from the letter, the initial analysis, ours, Vince and mine, was it's a horrible situation, right? The child's kidnapped, but it does not appear initially that he's doing it for his own gratification, right? Quite the contrary. He says in there he wants the children to force us, the powers that be, to listen to him and give him the female reporter, right? If the children were the object of his desire, then he wouldn't trade them out, right? He would keep them and use and abuse them. So we're getting into like true hostage analysis situations. And I'll just give you a comparison. Like, a husband comes home and catches his wife cheating, and he holds his wife hostage there against her will, right? He has what he wants. The object of his venom and hatred is the, cheating spouse. So he doesn't need anything from law enforcement. He's taking his anger and aggression on his emotional person right there, right? The one who caused him this pain. So that's totally different from Dykes. Dykes gave the victim selection to the bus driver. So Dykes had no individual say in who was going to be the victim, right? And he has no emotional attachment to Ethan. So we viewed that as a true hostage situation, meaning that he didn't have any personal, interest or attachment to the children. They were just bartering chips for him to use to exchange for the female reporter. So that was kind of the first analysis that we thought they were safe. But then the second this is like the game changer, is the FBI was able to insert some covert collection devices. So we were able to have audio and video into the crisis site. Because beforehand, there was just tremendous pressure. Think about it. A child in a bunker, what's going on in there? Is he being abused, beaten, horrible things happening to Ethan? But because of this covert collection, now we had 24/7, and this is on day 2, when we were able to get it all in there. I'll just say that because I'm not going to reveal any sensitive techniques. But now we could see and hear exactly how Ethan is being treated, which gave us tremendous relief.
Yeah, you're on the screen.
You want citrus blend or fresh scent? The green one?
So think about that for a moment. Dykes is asking the child, do you want citrus blend or fresh scent? So he's given Ethan choices, right? And it also shows how planned out Dykes had, food and water and children's items for weeks and weeks and weeks. But we assessed that behavior as grandfatherly, right? He's
right. I was going to say it sounded. I hate using this word in this context. It sounded kind. He almost sounded deferential to Ethan, like, "Hey, do you want this or this?" Very, very submissive to the child's desires in that moment. So that was a quite revealing moment there.
Yeah, you're 100% accurate. We, again, termed it as grandfatherly, which is kind of bizarre, right? To describe a hostage taker as grandfatherly, but we're providing advice and assessment to decision makers, and that was the term we used. So yeah, we were all kind of shocked observing and hearing that behavior, but it was very comforting, at least, to know that, again, Ethan is not being abused, because if Ethan was being abused, right, we would have to send in we'd have to send in the boys right away, right?
Right.
If we have a serious threat of bodily injury or physical harm, that would meet the threshold to send in tactical right away. So what that covert collection allowed us to do, right, is assess the behavior and see, hey, Ethan is okay. Again, he's a horrible, like, long-term situation. He can't stay in the bunker, but we don't have to immediately send in tactical now on a hasty emergency assault rescue plan, right? Until we've developed really and refined some good course of action, which lowers risk.
And so you were there, and now you are the lead FBI negotiator, and you also come from a tactical background. How did that aid you in creating the ultimately successful plan of resolution that was tactical for Jimmy Dykes?
Well, I'm very fortunate to have a very unique background. Again, I spent 8 years as an operator on the hostage rescue team, so I understand exactly how HRT operators think. The tenets of a hostage rescue are speed, surprise, violence of action. HRT operators want to resolve, you want to use their skills and immediately or as quickly as possible eliminate the threat, right? So I understand that mentality, having been in that world. And then I transitioned to the negotiator world. And negotiators at CNU, they're like mental chess grandmasters, almost playing on a 4-dimensional board. They assess behavior. They use words as weapons, and they talk about emotions. They elicit conversations. They want to slow things down. So it's really, they're two kind of diametrically opposing viewpoints. They still have the same goal. They want peaceful resolution, but they don't always mesh well. And we've seen, unfortunately, in the Bureau's history, going back to Waco, was unfortunately, a big conflict between the two. And as a result, there was some great changes made, and CERG was established. And, they're under one unified command now. So I will, again, because of my background, I was able to go back and forth in those two worlds, right? Even my partner, he was the negotiating leader, I was his deputy. Vince couldn't go back and forth in the HRT world, right? Because he was never a tactical guy. He was never an HRT. But I could, right? I'd served with those men overseas. I'd been in shootings with them. I had the respect, and I was able to walk in and out of that tactical world, right? It's very insular unit, HRT. And unless you've served on the unit, they're really not going to give you the time of day or, listen to you. But having that experience and having those relationships and the kind of the bona fides allowed me to. And then same thing in the negotiation unit. Now that I had that training and experience, I'm able to walk around and maneuver in that world. So they're kind of two unique kind of ecosystems, which are very independent, yet they work together a little bit. But again, I was able to maneuver all throughout the both. And then because of my kind of role there, and I also was able to become into the inner circle of advisors, for the SAC and speaking with the director. So I was able to influence and provide guidance, was able to influence kind of the outcome at times.
So pausing for a moment in this 7-day-long hostage situation, you were not only speaking to Jimmy Dykes, listening to his tapes, boots on ground there in Alabama, but you were also speaking directly to the director of the FBI. You were the conduit between the very top and the hostage taker, the very epicenter of the crisis itself there in Midland City, Alabama. While that was happening and you were the touch point of that entire constellation, what was going on with the media?
I played an unfortunate role on, I think it was day 4. The neighbor was interviewed, Rhonda Wilbur, by local media.
I actually joined with Rhonda Wilbur, who is a neighbor. So Rhonda, what can you actually tell us about?
My husband and my oldest son were home at the time, and they heard the shooting, and then the bus was, the kids were scattering from the bus. The neighbor, he has been for a long time a source of concern. He killed one of my dogs, and I had animal cruelty people out then, And he has, as I said, he's been a source of interest for a long time because he has been like a time bomb waiting to go off.
So that hit the airwaves day 4, you said. I can't imagine the national pandemonium then of learning that a, quote, time bomb has a 5-year-old child in a bunker held hostage.
Yeah, so Dykes actually had a television set in that 6 by 8 foot bunker. And he wasn't fixated on his coverage, although he did watch that news clip of the interview with the neighbor. And he had killed one of her dogs, which is strayed onto his property. And of course, in Dykes' mind, he's justified in, guarding his land. And he said he had warned the neighbor. And then he sees that and he tells the negotiator, I should have killed her other effing dog too, and called her, that rhymes with witch. I won't say the word. So Dykes is quite upset and irritated by seeing him portrayed as the villain, on the national media. So again, seeing you, my partner had a great idea. We sat down with our national media office, with the behavioral analysis rep and the sheriff and the SAC, and he had the idea, hey, let's try to send a positive message to Dykes, right? Dykes got riled up. The goal of negotiators is to lower emotions, keep things on a stable level. People are more logical, right, when their emotions are lowered. But now Dykes was was emotionally reacting to that neighbor being interviewed, calling him that ticking time bomb. So the sheriff, to his credit, listened to our suggestion, and he went on national TV and thanked the murderer.
He's also allowed us to provide coloring books, medication, toys, and I want to thank him for taking care of our child. That's very important.
That's an elected official going on national TV, and this is intentional, right? We knew Jim Dykes had an anti-government grudge, right? So the Bureau stayed very intentionally behind the scenes. We put the sheriff front and center and engaged with the media because we knew Dykes would be watching it. So if of any people that Dykes respected, we thought the most would be the local sheriff, which was true. So that's why we had the sheriff deliver the message. And what a just courageous thing for the sheriff to do, to go on and say that. So again, gutsy Sheriff Wally Olson just did a fantastic job. And there shows that he put, that Ethan, as everyone there did, right, put the goal of saving Ethan above everything else, personal career, no concern, obviously, for future election efforts, because no one really understood what he was doing until now, of course, years later.
So, Kyle, in the 7-day hostage situation, when was the beginning of the end?
It was starting at day 5, because really day 2 to 4, things were kind of copacetic in the bunker. He was, somewhat calm and stable. He reacted to the media messages, but we'd, kept him at a stable level. But day 5, it all goes off the rails, and actually was an opportunity. Each time we're going up to the bunker lid and on the phone calls with Dykes, law enforcement through the negotiators are trying to build rapport with Dykes, right? We're trying to we want to be able to influence him to peacefully surrender. So on day 5, think about this. Dykes on the phone, I hear him say to Bill, hey, I can help you guys. One of those springs came off on the hatch on his bunker lid. So I think I sent you a picture. You can see there's 2 like garage door springs.
Yeah.
And one to come off in a storm. So Dykes was offering to help law enforcement. He said, I will come up underneath the hatch lid. I will lift it up so you guys can then bring that spring down and connect it. We had hundreds of law enforcement there. We could have got a crane. We could have had any number of ways to attach that spring. But because of negotiators building that rapport, engaged him in conversation, showing empathy, again, not judging him, not trying to be too confrontational with him, he offers to help us. So on day 5, I briefed the HRT commander, say, hey, we may have an opportunity here, right? If Ethan is safely away and if Dykes' hands are occupied by lifting up on the bunker hatch lid, right, that means he doesn't have a gun in his hand, he can't initiate the ID, and maybe, it's a window for tactical to possibly resolve it. So we go up on that day 5, our normal, like as a routine, every time we would knock on the hatch lid. Hey, Jim, it's us. Again, we had a set of communications. We wanted we wanted him to be accustomed to our same routine each and every time. So we do that. And he says, okay, because he would have to loosen the cable winches On the bottom of that hatch lid were 3 eye bolts, which had like bicycle locks going 12 feet down to a little winch system. So not only is it super heavy, 200 pounds, he has those 3 winch cables going down. So he would have to loosen that up each and every time, just 2 or 3 inches for us to lift up and drop in the medicine delivery, right? The medicine was just like an envelope. We would slide that in.
Okay.
So we deliver the medicine, and then we say, okay, let's attach the garage door spring now. Jim, can you come up? So he comes up, and he lifts up the hatch lid. I can see his hair. I'm like just 2 feet away. There's an operator there. And, right.
Are you on your stomachs? Right. Sorry to interrupt, but like, are you all on your stomachs then with the hatch? Or are you standing looking down, or what's the vantage point like for all the law enforcement around?
Great question. So the front of that bunker has cinder block in front of it. So, and it's raised up. So most law enforcement, the operators were on their bellies, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I was just on my knees next to it.
Okay.
And I saw his hair. And then, the idea was hopefully if the operator could see that Ethan was not there, and then it was definitely Dykes, and it's a 0-fail shot, right? That operator cannot shoot unless he knows Dykes is there and Ethan is not there, right? So unfortunately, as Dykes lifts it up, the sunlight glints off just the top of the metal barrel, and Dykes sees that there's a gun barrel, just 2 feet away.
Oh.
He drops the hatch lid, says, "You mother effers, you just tried to kill me. I was trying to help you." Right, so 5 days of rapport building, of active listening, of us, developing a relationship with Dykes is all down the tube in an instant. And again, it's not the operator's fault. He can't take that shot unless it's a 100% for sure that Ethan wasn't there. And Dykes just got a lucky glimpse, of the gun barrel. He becomes enraged. This is the beginning of the end. He starts yelling at us, and then we actually go off, pull the team off. We got to get out of there because Dykes is just spiraling further out of control. Rafferty with Vince calls in, tries to make an excuse. Hey, that was just a new guy at the hole. He didn't know what he was doing. He'll never come back up there again. But really, Dykes knows. He got a reality check. We were trying to kill him. We were trying to end the resolution, and we had kind of betrayed his trust, right? We had not. Again, he was trying to help us. We tried to kill him. The worst part is now he's beginning to objectify Ethan. He's distancing himself. Before, right, he tended to Ethan's needs. As you said, you could see that grandfatherly. Now we see him turn his back on Ethan. He's ignoring Ethan. Ethan's having a tantrum. He doesn't tend to his needs at all. So now the risk factors are just increasing, and he issues an ultimatum, a deadline. On day 6, he says, by 5:30 p.m. tomorrow, a determination will be made, and the survivors will be held accountable. Right? If there's survivors, that means that there are casualties. And so we have to take Dykes at his word, right? He also has inside, there's a second IED that we find, second improvised explosive device, and we see him rehearse that initiation by lining up the barrel next to a PVC pipe. So now we have 2 IEDs. We have another handgun inside the helium tank. All right, there's just a massive number of lethal objects inside the bunker. And now we have to resolve this, or have to have a plan to somehow meet Dykes' needs or do something by 5:30 p.m. tomorrow. But that's how really day 6 is when it comes to a head.
When Dykes, as you said, reacted and flew off the handle, you see him rehearsing now this use of weapon and all of that. How much of that did he know you were hearing? Meaning, short of the ultimatum that he issued you about the survivors, was everything else in the privacy of that bunker that you captured on your clandestine audio and video, or did he call you on the throwaway phone and become hysterical and yell? How much of that did he know that he was communicating to you that he felt betrayed?
Great question. So he did call us, and we spoke with him, and there is an audio clip. Then you can see his emotional level. He's ramped up.
And there's going to be a determination as to whether or not just exactly what the hell is going to take place. Somebody above that sorry son of a bitch out there, just like I said yesterday, that sorry son of a bitch in the authority above you people, if that sorry son of a bitch doesn't have the man enough to talk to me and treat me and respond to me and answer some questions for me and give me some information, then by God, it's his responsibility, the outcome, and you just go ahead and send some motherfucker down that funnel up there to their death, and you're chicken, you're scared. You know damn well I'm smarter than most of you people. You know damn well I have the knowledge, I have the experience, I have the ability, and I have the to show just how corrupt this system is, just how corrupt you people are, just how hypocrite you people are, just how stupid you people are.
And so we could assess it off the phone call, and then we also could assess it during that covert collection.
I can't imagine hearing that in real time, how you felt knowing that Ethan was still under his watch and he was clearly so near a breaking point.
Crushing pressure. I've been shot at, I've been in combat, and that was still by far the most difficult week of my life. Having and feeling, as we all did, we felt a sense of responsibility to Ethan. And I remember going to bed that night, I said, we cannot fail Ethan. We cannot let him down. We have to try to get him out of there. Excuse me, sorry, I get emotional just thinking about that last day.
Nothing to apologize for. Take your time.
Because it was a tactical nightmare, right? Normally, there's multiple entry points, right, to a structure, right? Windows, doors, 2 or 3 levels. So HRT, right, will plan multiple different ways to affect a tactical entry. Here, there's just one way in, one way out. We actually had an incredible whole of government kind of response to this. We had ground penetrating radar from the military, and they'd put these big vehicles with the radar and looked at the side of the bunker because we were trying to see, is there any way we could like tunnel in from the side to create another breach point? But there was none, because we had structural engineers say, hey, if you tunnel in from the side, the whole structure could collapse, right? If it collapses on Ethan, then that's a horrible day. And we even went so far, the FBI rented 2 dirt-sucking trucks, which I didn't know existed. Imagine like a massive, almost like a porta potty truck, but made to suck out dirt in case the structure collapsed. So we had those on 24/7 standby at the crisis site to be there to respond if, God forbid, the structure collapsed. We even explored like silent drill options, which drill is not so silent. I remember asking the explosives expert, I said, can you make an exploding cell phone, right? Could we give Dykes another phone and maybe it would go off and neutralize him that way? I was told, no, we can't create that, in 12 hours. I understand. Not something you can just whip up on site. We even explored sleeping gas as an option. Could we put Dykes to sleep? And again, we have FBI doctors and specialists, and they told us that any dosage that would put Dykes to sleep could be potentially lethal to Ethan. So sleeping gas was out as an option. With that ground and structure being unstable, the only thing that I thought of that I had noticed, again, looking at Ethan's behavior, was we'd twice delivered toys to Ethan on day 2 and day 4, I think. And I noticed he went to the far side of the bed, which there's a hatch, goes down the 11-foot, 12-foot drop. Then there's 2 beds, and he went on the far side to play with the toys, which put him as far away from the ladder well as possible in that small 6 by 8 foot area. And I thought, how can we lure Dykes up the ladder? How can we create that max distance between the subject and a victim in a really confined space? And the one person he'd expressed an interest in speaking to was his 2 daughters. He'd been estranged from them for more than 20 years. And we contacted both daughters. And one daughter, politely said, no, I don't want to have anything to do with my father. But Cindy was fantastic. She said, whatever I can do to help Ethan. And she came to the scene. So we started prepping her for potential conversation with Jim. And this is back in 2013, before Skype was super popular. And so we're talking and brainstorming. And I said, hey, let's put the daughter on a Skype session on a laptop. I'll lower it down the top of the lid, and then he'll have to come up the ladder then if he wants to talk to his daughter. So it was a parallel approach plan, which was like a trap that didn't have to be sprung. It could be sprung or it could not be sprung, depending on if those conditions were met. Meaning the first condition is Ethan takes the toys and goes to the far side of the bed. That's condition 1, because Ethan is in the safest possible area. And condition 2 is Dykes comes up that ladder well. So if those 2 conditions were met, and we briefed the FBI director on this, then he said, okay, if those conditions are met, then that would open a window for possible tactical resolution. But if the conditions aren't met, then we can still go down the negotiation track, right? We can have the daughter talk to Dykes and try to persuade him to possibly surrender. So again, before I talk about those 2 tracks, negotiation and tactical, this was a kind of a perfect implementation, which provided both options depending on Dykes' choices and his reaction.
So your next step was implementing that conditional plan then, getting Cindy on the laptop, getting the toy down the hatch.
Right. So actually, I briefed my good friend Whit was the senior team leader of the ground forces there on HRT. I first briefed him on the plan. He loved it. He said, let's go to the HRT commander. We briefed him. He loved it. Then we went to the SAC. So we first have to kind of sell it on the FBI side and to the sheriff. They all liked it. But then we also have to sell it to Dykes, right? The subject always gets a vote in the resolution. So that was up to Rafferty. And in true negotiator fashion, we sell it to Dykes as it was his idea, right? Hey, Jim, you said you wanted to talk to your daughter. We brought your daughter here, but we don't want to bring her down there. We're going to just lower her computer, and we don't tell them how far we're going to lower it, right? We don't go into the details of it. We say we're going to lower a computer to you so you can talk to your daughter, which is what you wanted to do, right? So he actually was very excited. He combed his hair that morning. He put on a fresh shirt because he wanted to tell his daughter his story, which again, I've explained to you, there's no real story, just his injustices. And we didn't brief her on the possible tactical resolution. We were sincerely hopeful that she may be able to persuade him to come out, but we also had that tactical option, if need be.
And that tactical option, is this, similar to what you outlined before, a type of sniper right there? Or is this, in that highly conditional, highly sensitive environment with a 5-year-old in there and that ladder situation, what was the extent of that tactical nature? Essentially, what would be unleashed if those 2 conditions were met appropriately? So
the structure itself, right, had no windows. It was like a fatal funnel, right, straight down. The Gulfport CB Battalion, again, I refer to the whole of government response. Those CBs were awesome. They came up on day 2, and the CBs created a mock-up of the bunker. And you can see it's just an incredible, 15 high-foot structure, which we were able to practice on and rehearse. So each and every day, HRT was refining their assault plan, just some great creativity and initiative, and the numerous iterations of that assault planning, each day made it a better and better kind of entry plan, or they would learn from it. So the number 1 man, he realized that it was a 12-foot drop, right? So the first thing they had to come up with a quick method to safely descend 12 feet and then be ready to fight, right? Okay. So because jumping down 12 feet, it's like, think how high that is, and being ready to fight with a gun in your hands. So one of the operators had a great idea. Let's have like a metal pole, like a pull-up bar, and we would drop down the hatch lid and then just lower ourselves to 2 feet. And then I was on day 2 or 3. But then they realized the pole would move back and forth. The pole would roll on the wood, right, as they were dropping down, which they wanted stability. They didn't want the pole to move. So then they put oars on the side, right? So the oars would then not have it jump around so much. But even then the oars moved a little bit. So then they went back to the welding shop and they put little spikes in the oars so it would catch into the wood. So that's just an example of the iterative process the HRT operators are going through to make the plan better and better. So that number 1 guy, what they learned is, hey, with that bar, you can drop down, you can be in the fight, ready to fight within 2.5 seconds. Like we were timing out to the fractions of seconds. And then that number 1 man knew as soon as he dropped, he was going to lunge forward, and he knew he was going to either encounter an armed subject who had already killed someone, and it was going to be a fight to the death, or he would lunge forward and encounter an innocent, scared, terrified 5-year-old child in there. So he knew it was either fight to the death or protect with my life.
So walk us through what happened.
So on day 7, we finally get the green light from the FBI director to proceed with the plan. And the breachers are the first ones to go up. They place again, very small charges. The explosive charges can't be too large, right? Because it could collapse the structure. Because we want to take out those 3 eye bolts, those metal eye bolts that have the cables, which are winched down, right? Because we want to break those cables, or break the eye bolts, so then it can lift the hatch up, right? Because those cables are pulling down on the eye bolts, preventing us from opening the hatch lid. So that's what those 3 eye bolts. And just, again, to show you the creativity, the breachers have small, rare earth magnets, which is a little, square, like 1 inch by 1 inch, very strong magnets. So during a medicine delivery, the breacher would go up and hover the magnet on top of the hatch lid, and where it stuck, they realized that was one of those eye bolts, right? So it's stuck there. He grabbed a black Sharpie, right, and then drew a circle around it. And then next time we came up for delivery, he hovered it around the other area, and he found where the magnet stuck and drew a Sharpie. So they knew exactly where those eye bolts were, so they knew exactly where to place the charges.
So how did, if at all, those affect this plan, this attack resolution plan, in terms of the firepower that you could or could not use? Would they be set off, be detonated, and risk Ethan's life?
We're breaking this down by fractions of seconds. We knew that after the charges went off, Dykes would have to grab the rifle, and in the smoke and debris and in the aftermath of an explosive charge going off right on his head, we assessed it would take him a few seconds, if not over 10 seconds, to go find that rifle and then use the fine motor skill to line up the charge. So we absolutely thought through that. But in rehearsals, the team, within 5 to 7 seconds, repeatedly was able to get to Dykes, again, before we assessed he would have time to detonate the second IED or to harm Ethan. Because ideally, we were hoping, right, if he was up the ladder exactly where we wanted and got lucky, we were hopeful that the shrapnel or the explosive force would, maybe knock him out or daze him or maybe neutralize him, right, from shrapnel. That would, again, buy us some time so that HRT, again, uses that speed, surprise, violence of action before the individual can act. So, again, rehearse, trying to get down to fractions of seconds to be in there quickly before he could initiate the IDs or harm Ethan.
And so now it's final go time. You have the green light from the director. You have the green light from all the others in charge down the chain. And then you get Cindy on the phone, or on the computer, Zoom phone. And then what happens?
Right. So I'm carrying the laptop with Cindy, which is hardwired. We didn't want any connectivity issues, of course. The one I was holding was hardwired to a van. So Cindy was protected in a van with another negotiator who had the other laptop, right, that it was connected to. And then there actually was a third laptop for the ground force commander to hold. So we go up there. So the breachers go place those 3 little shaped charges. We do our normal routine. Hey, Jim, we got the meds for Ethan. He loosened the cables up a couple inches. We lift up the hatch. We slide in the envelope with the medication that drops down. And this one was a toy delivery also, right? So we ask him to undo the winch cables a little bit more. We have some toys, right? So we drop a bag of toys in. So it drops to 12 feet. And then he would come get it, right? The item. He wouldn't be in the bunker hatch. He would not be in the funnel when we drop the items down. So he gets the toys. And the one element, besides Dykes, we don't control Ethan either. But thankfully, we can see through our covert camera, Ethan takes the toys to the bed. So fantastic, right? He's the pattern of behavior which I observed, Ethan followed through upon, and he's playing in that corner of the bed. So again, perfect so far, right? Things seem to go according to plan. And then Dykes goes up the ladder. The ground force commander, Cindy Dykes calls out, says, Dad, it's me. Dad, it's me. Right? And we had rehearsed with her some talking points and what we wanted to try to her to say to her dad, right, to persuade him possibly to let Ethan go. So she was ready, again, with that negotiator. She calls out to her father, and then the ground force commander sees Dykes' hand in front of the monitor, and so then he orders the assault. And the breachers initiate the charges, and here's a video. One rare treat here as a actual video from the overhead surveillance vehicle of HRT assaulting the bunker in Midland City, Alabama. looks like the first man goes in and the second man is right behind him. However, the third man can't get in. And the object is to get, 5 operators in rehearsals. 5 was the most we could get inside the bunker. So the object was to get 5 people in there as quickly as possible. And you actually can see in the video, the operators are almost, nudging one another to get into the fight. As I described, the very special people that are on the hostage rescue team, right? They train every day and they're risking their lives. And here they are fighting each other's almost, not fighting each other, but, they want to get in the fight so bad to save Ethan that you see them nudging each other to get in there as quickly as possible. However, the first man does not drop down the 12 feet. You see he ran up at the bar, he dropped down, and then his upper body is hanging up outside the bunker. It doesn't compute, right? Like elevator shaft, normally you walk an elevator shaft, you drop down, right? You wouldn't see him anymore. So all of us, myself included, I'm there scratching my head. Like, why did he not drop down? There's nothing there, right? The breachers had blown those charges. They lifted the hatch. He jumped in. Like, it doesn't make sense why he's not dropping to the bottom. And he's, even the number one man too, is bewildered, kind of looking down because he doesn't see Dykes, doesn't see Ethan, and he's, again, held up there by something. And the worst thing is now Dykes starts shooting at him. Oh. And the number one man, he can't fire back, right? Because he doesn't have a pinpoint location on Dykes, and he doesn't know exactly where Ethan is. So think about that. He's stuck there being shot at by Dykes. So we are hopeful that Dykes, right, would possibly be incapacitated or temporarily, disoriented from the explosive charges. We were not successful. Now he's actively fighting. So some great leadership. Witt was the senior team leader. He decisively said, pull him out. So the other HRT operators pull out the number one man. The doctor looks at him and says, are you shot? Are you okay? And he said, I don't know, doc, you tell me. All right, he was so hyped up on adrenaline and didn't even know if he was hit or not. So meanwhile, they deploy some non-lethal flashbang devices. They're concussionary devices which make a loud noise, emit smoke and flash, but they don't do any damage, right? They're just trying to really occupy Dykes because they don't want him to initiate the IED. So the team leader says, let's put in a canine. We have some of the best canines in the world. So you see, even the canine now cannot get into the bunker. There's some obstacle there preventing, again, the canine's not afraid. These dogs are tremendous assets and are truly part of the team, but the canine can't get in. So they pull the canine out. And this was like a pivotal moment because the first entry, right, is unsuccessful. The number one man couldn't get in. They threw the flashbangs, and now I hear Ethan crying. We all hear Ethan crying. Just incredibly hard to deal with because now we know he's at least alive, which is good, but we know that he's distraught and he's in tears, shrieking. And now Dykes, he has a remote pull, which is basically a rope connected to the IED at the speaking tube. Dykes pulls that IED. Oh. So not only is he firing up at the guy in the hole, but when the guy comes out of the hole, he then yanks the IED. So he's trying everything in his power, right, to kill law enforcement.
From the first deployment after the conditions are met to now this moment, how many seconds have gone by that I'm sure felt like an eternity?
Yeah, it's over 30 seconds at this point. And remember, we trained and the HRT commander had told the director, we'll be in there in 5 to 7 seconds, sir. Yeah. And now we're past 30 seconds. Each second felt like an eternity. Just again, like soul crushing pressure on every one of us there and everyone, at the crisis site who was monitoring from the live feed. And the team leader, again, Witt, just had a fantastic sense and read of the situation. He didn't speak unless he needed to, and he knew that the team needed a little jolt, like a little spark, because again, the team was almost perplexed. He stymied the nation's best law enforcement counterterrorism team, the FBI hostage rescue team, couldn't get in the hole for 30 seconds. Like, this does not happen to HRT, and yet it was happening. And Witt said calmly, coolly, guys, this is what we do. Get in the hole. Get in the hole. Right? Just that inspirational words. Again, it was like a lightning bolt, which I've never felt any time before. And it just energized the team and provided purpose and motivation. So 2 breachers bravely reached into the hole to see what was the obstruction. What is holding back the number 1 guy in the K9 right from lowering in the bunker lid? So they're being shot at. They reach in from different angles. One guy feels a secondary set of cables, and the other guy feels another set of cables. That Dykes had added a secondary set of cables down there at like the midway point. So remember, we had looked down that whole hatch lid dozens of times on our medicine deliveries and when we were going 3 times a day, right? So we knew and had seen there was nothing down there past the first set of cables. Well, Dykes had added a secondary set of cables that very morning on day 7, and that's what it was, like a crisscross, imagine like a spider web of 3 cables. That's why the number 1 man couldn't go down. So the breachers, again, one guy uses a shotgun. He shoots away the 1 or 2 on his side. The other one has cable cutters, and he snips it. And they say, breach is clear. All right, now this is a moment of truth. Think about, put yourself in the number 1 man's position for a moment. You know there's a man down there who's already committed murder. He's actively fighting. He's waiting to kill whoever comes down that hole. But he knew it was his job. He told me later, it was my responsibility to get in the hole, and he felt like he let the team down because he didn't get in the hole, even though it was clearly not his responsibility. And as I mentioned to you, I've been on many high-risk operations and arrests, domestically and overseas. I've been in shootings. I've been on over 100 combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan with U.S. military special mission units. So I know what it's like to go through a door and not know what's on the other side. But here, he knew exactly what was on the other side. He knew there was a determined fighter waiting to kill him. Yet the number 1 man didn't pause, didn't hesitate. He jumped right back in the hole. And I've seen, again, incredibly brave men and women in the FBI and in the military do some fantastic things, but I've never seen anything as brave as what you're about to see here. So just incredible, uncommon valor and heroism displayed. Because remember that number 1 man, he has a split-second decision. He's going to lunge forward and encounter either Dykes, who's actively fighting with a gun to kill him, or an innocent 5-year-old. He lunges forward, and like a light switch, he has to decide, fight or protect. That's what all law enforcement officers have to do in a split second when they're confronted with a potential lethal situation or an innocent victim. He lunges forward, and he encounters Ethan. He cradles Ethan in his arms. He turns away from Dykes. He tells Ethan, "You're going to be okay, Ethan. You're going to be okay." Shielding his body, protecting Ethan with his very own body. The number 2 man, and I must say, give credit to my Marine brothers. First man was a Iraq Marine veteran, jumps in the hole. Second man is an Army Ranger. Third man is a Navy SEAL, so great kind of combined former military task force, which enters in the bunker. The second man enters the Army individual and engages. He shoots Dykes twice in the chest. Dykes closes the distance, and the pistol goes out of battery, which means the pistol no longer functions. On a Glock pistol, if you depress the muzzle while you're pulling the trigger, you can actually release the slide, and the weapon will no longer function. And that's exactly what happens. So Dykes, after being shot twice, still advances towards him, and the operator's pistol goes out of battery. And they start tussling. They're going on the ground to fight. And the number 3 man has a flashlight on his barrel, on his rifle, his M4. He turns on his light. He sees a pair of blue jeans. He knows that all the HRT operators are wearing CRY, this camouflage green uniform, and he knows it's not Ethan. So he follows up, and then the other individual will transition from his non-functioning pistol to his rifle, and the number 2 and 3 man engage and eliminate Dykes. Then 4 and 5 go in. They extract Ethan. They take him to the number 1 man, and you'll see now here in the video Ethan coming out in a red shirt.
I wasn't there, and I feel emotional hearing and seeing this. And I can't imagine the overwhelming emotion that you must have felt when you saw Ethan come safe out of there.
When Ethan emerged out of that bunker alive, and I could see he was breathing, and I was 5 feet from him, I almost couldn't contain myself. All of us had contained and kind of suppressed the feelings and compartmentalized ourselves. He's rushed to the hospital, and I remember walking out and just bursting into tears. I couldn't contain it anymore. It's just such a jubilant feeling, and actually a relief of stress and pressure, and knowing that I was able to kind of orchestrate the plan, but then seeing the heroics of those 5 individuals that went the hole and risked everything to try to save an innocent child. It's it's a remarkable story showing the FBI and law enforcement at its finest.
And to me, as an average American hearing this, I feel like it's a bookend story of heroism, because we had Charles Poland in the beginning, who was just, an average person too, an ordinary man that did something extraordinary. And he protected those kids. He gave his life protecting those kids. And then we have, at the finale of this horrific 7-day event, these operators, all of you who have dedicated your lives to serving others and knew that you would be ready to sacrifice themselves to protect Ethan and to protect all of you who were there. Can you share whether there were any injuries sustained by the operators?
It's miraculous. When you look down the bunker hatch lid, it's in a small, maybe 3 by 3 foot area of a 12-foot drop. And afterwards, I looked down there. There's bullet holes all around the wood, and the operator was in the center of that. And for him not to get hit, again, miraculous is the only word that can describe it, that he was not injured. So thankfully, all operators were unscathed, and Ethan was unscathed as well. Although he did mention to the doctors at the hospital when he was first checked out by an FBI paramedic at the scene and then taken to the ambulance, which was waiting for him. But he tells the doctors, man, those guys shoot a lot. He thought, the flashbangs were us shooting at him, which we clearly were not shooting at Ethan. But his comment, still kind of brings a chuckle. But the fact that no one was injured is mind-boggling, considering how small a space it was and how many rounds he fired. Over 15. In fact, he initiated one IED. Thankfully, he did not initiate the other IED.
I mean, I think the best word you used indeed was a miracle. It's God's protection. Kyle, what happened next?
Ethan was reunited with his mother and did go back to school. So it was a fantastic to see him emerge relatively unscathed, considering the horrible circumstances with which Ethan was, trapped and kidnapped. He has now actually, thankfully, been adopted by the Turner family, a local pastor there. He and his wife. So he's in their custody and care now, and he's doing well. So we are all, ecstatic. The hundreds of law enforcement, who were there at the crisis, to see Ethan, doing well now, obviously just warms our hearts and makes it all worthwhile.
And many of you were, rightly so, received top commendation from the government for your heroics that day. Can you share with us those awards?
Yes, the 5 operators who jumped in the hole right, were the true heroes of Midland City by far. They deserve all the credit, and they were recipients of the Presidential Medal of Valor. So they went to the White House and were presented with that by the president himself, which is fantastic recognition. There are about seven others of us, and I am not a hero. I served in the company of heroes, but the other 7 of us received the Attorney General's Award for Exceptional Heroism, which is the Department of Justice's highest award for valor, and we received that from the Attorney General himself.
I see you as a hero. I see you all as heroes, Kyle. Thank you so much for sharing this story in such a deeply connective way.
Thank you. I must say it was a collective team effort. There were others there with me as well, so I cannot take all of the credit. I want to recognize that in every one of these crises, it is law enforcement coming together, working collectively to the successful outcome and resolution. So it's really a team of teams I was just fortunate to be part of.